Hello, welcome everyone to today's event. We're just going to give just a few minutes just for more people to join. But thank you so much for attending today and spending a little part of your lunch break with us.
Hello. Oh, my video was on. Okay, I'm back as myself instead of PRSA.
Okay. All right, so we're going to go on and get started. It's 12:01. So hello everyone. Welcome to PRSA Pittsburgh special Black History Month event, Empowering Tomorrow's PR Leaders, featuring Fatou Barry, founder of PR Girl Manifesto and the creative agency AB Media Group. My name is Taylor Fife, and I am on PRSA Pittsburgh's board as their Diversity and Inclusion Chair, and I will also be the moderator for today's event. So on behalf of PRSA Pittsburgh, thank you for everyone who's joining us today. During this event, we ask that all attendees please mute their microphones. After the discussion, we're going to leave some time for Q&A. So if anyone has a question throughout today's event, please ask it in the Zoom chat, and then we'll do our best to get to it at the end of today's presentation. So without further ado, let's introduce today's guest, Fatou Barry. So as a PR pro, you may recognize her or her content on your Instagram feeds through her work on PR Girl Manifesto. Fatou is the founder of PR Girl Manifesto, which is a digital community of more than 40,000 women in the communications field. The community works to reimagine the PR communication space while supporting its constituents through access to resources, fellowship, and mentorship. Fatou is also a cultural strategist, best known for her work in communications and community building. Through her creative agency, AB Media Group, Fatou builds authentic and strategic products, platforms, campaigns, and content for mission-consistent brands passionate about making a difference. Her work is influenced by her desire to bridge equity gaps for young women of color. She has created several spaces to grow and nurture this community by sharing knowledge and experience to generate opportunities. This includes the launch of Hold the Press, which is a grassroots initiative co-founded by Fatou that calls for action, accountability, and transparency in the PR industry for Black people. Fatou believes in the power of collaborative mentorship and sharing crucial information important to a young professional's development, which is what motivates and rewards her as it drives her work and personal growth. So thank you, Fatou, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's always so funny to hear your bio read back to you.
I know. I've had that experience before. It's like weird hearing about yourself.
Right.
Yeah. So let's go on and get started. So our first question, so why did you just decide to start PR Girl Manifesto and your agency?
Yeah, so PR Girl Manifesto, I started post-grad, like I think the summer that I graduated. And it really came out of just a rude awakening to realizing that post-grad was not, as easy and just as like linear as people like made it look like. I found myself in an industry, one, where I kind of felt underprepared. I felt like I had learned a lot of valuable information in college, but it didn't feel like it was up to date with what the industry actually looked like. So I found myself learning and working at the same time, which was a bit of a struggle at the beginning. And then I realized that I wasn't the only one that was experiencing this. A lot of my friends that were in comms as well were like, well, this is like a lot, I wish I had learned how to do this. I wish that I had practiced, this in undergrad. And I realized that there was a community of us that were really passionate about the industry and the career force that we were entering, but we were not prepared for it. And it also felt like there weren't enough resources. Specifically, I think as a Black woman, I found that it was just it was a bit more aggressive, there were a lot of adjustments of not just the actual like learning material, but also like culturally, right? Being in this like corporate workspace and not really enjoying the company culture of the company that I was working for at the time. And so I really just felt like I needed an outlet to not only navigate these new things that I was experiencing, like you know, just in that experience, but to be able to relay that information as well, because I knew that if I was struggling with it, as someone who was proactive and prides herself on being proactive, then I knew that there was a whole, you know, industry of PR professionals and comm professionals who felt underprepared but didn't have the knowledge to know, like, well, I should know this, you know, I should be doing this, or this is what I should be tuned into. So it really came out of fulfilling that void for myself, and conversely for like the community that and the industry that I found myself in.
Yeah, that's really inspiring to hear. And yeah, and thank you so much, you know, for creating this community and having these resources available for all of us. I know personally for me, I love it. I love your content. So
Thank you.
yeah, so what specifically makes PR Girl Manifesto and your agency different from other community resources and agencies? What is your specific content?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that sets us apart is that we are completely 100% community centered. I think what you'll see now is that community is used as a means to leverage another, you know, aspect of business or development, whereas the community is like where you're getting leads, or you're building a community because you want to build a customer base, you know. That's not us at all. We've always been community focused, community centered, and it's why there are no barriers of entry to any of the information that we give, right? Everything that we've ever done is accessible. And I think that's what makes us different, is that we work to eliminate barriers of entry instead of creating them. I don't think that there's any reason why people should have to pay for knowledge that's on the internet, you know, but might not just have the tools and resources and know how, like what specifically to be looking for. I think that what really makes us different is also that we cater to somebody who might not have a linear path in this industry. Whereas, you know, PR and comms can make you feel like you have to follow a certain trajectory to be successful. We recognize that that's not the case at all. People are coming from other industries and wanting to, you know, to find a career in PR. They're individuals who might not even have had the opportunity to go to a 2-year, let alone a 4-year college to learn all of these things. So I think that's really what makes us different and sets us apart, is that we're community centered. We always will be community centered, and that will always, that's our bottom line. It's nothing else but that, to make sure that individuals have the resources that they need, that knowledge is, you know, not kept away from anyone because of a barrier of entry, such as like access to finance, you know, to finances. That there's just, we're trying to eliminate all of those things, and I think that's what makes us different.
Right. Yeah, so for anyone who's just joining us, we're going to be doing Q&A at the end of today's event. So if you have a question during the presentation, please drop it in the Zoom chat, and we'll do our best to get to it at the end of today's presentation. So just wanted to throw that in there for all of our new guests. So how specifically does PR Girl Manifesto help women and women of color excel in the industry?
So our biggest value is the accessibility to knowledge and to mentorship. So one of the ways that we do this is by just providing information, right? So we are, you know, if we have access to a database, or we have access to a resource that you might have to pay, you know, to get tapped into industry news, we are trying to condense that information into a way that it doesn't necessarily, like, you know, hurt the platform where we received it from. You know, if it's like a PR week or a PR news, like, we're not about to just share everything, but we make that information that is public more accessible. And if there's something that's, you know, that we think is important, we reshare that. We also connect PR professionals together. So one thing that a lot of PR professionals were telling us is that they felt isolated. They felt that they didn't necessarily have a network that they could tap into, and not just professionally, but personally too, that other people who understood what it felt like to be a publicist or a PR pro, or just working in media relations and comm. And so we bridge that gap by providing that access to a network and to a community, as well as, you know, doing our best to, again, this idea of accessibility. If there are events happening, right, we'll sponsor tickets. So we'll pay the ticket price to then redistribute into our community, because we understand that not everybody has that access point. So really what we do is we provide information, but we're also trying to, like, make sure that everybody has an equal, you know, foundation to the information that we're sharing, and to learning more and to growing in the comm space.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just want to touch a little bit too on the previous question. I know personally, you know, for myself, I also didn't take the standard route to the PR and communications industry. I went to school for broadcast reporting. So when I first entered the industry, I was also, you know, a little lost, and it took me a little while to catch up. So having, like you said, having the access, focusing on the community, and having such a free access to this important information is really valuable. And I know a lot of people really benefit from your content too.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah, so can you just talk personally about your experience as a young Black woman in the PR and communications industry?
Yeah, I mean, I could write a book. But I think specifically my own individual experiences. So when I came into the industry, this was like I graduated 2014. So this is like the 2014, 2015 time period. PR looked different. I think in the last like 7 or 8 years, we've seen, you know, just a change in what the industry looks like. But specifically at that moment in time, you know, things leaned toward traditional public relations and traditional media relations. It's when influencer marketing was picking up, you know, social media was now like becoming a thing, but there was still pushback. I think a lot of other industries were learning to embrace it, but I think specifically in public relations, there was a pushback to like young and innovative ideas and this new age of like, hey, you also have digital PR, right? So like, you know, PR pros can also be like brand managers. They can also be like content marketers. There wasn't as much of an acceptance as there is now in being like a multifaceted PR professional. So I felt like I struggled a lot when I first entered because that's what I was passionate about, right? So I'm somebody who loves communication design. I'm somebody who loves social media, loves content marketing. And I think that reflects itself even in how we market and how we push content out there on the platform. Those are all things that I've been passionate about. And to kind of feel like there wasn't a space for that, you know, was hard. I think but I think that's a general thing for anybody that came into the industry that was passionate about those things at that time. But specifically as a young Black woman in the PR industry, just like, which we know, like having to overcompensate or feel like you have to overcompensate to be respected. I was also fairly young. And I think that that's something that we don't talk enough about, ageism. So experiencing a lot of ageism as a young Black woman in this industry where my ideas were second guessed, right? Always had to prove myself, always had to go give 200% to provide, you know, to prove that I was providing value. And a lot of those challenges, I think, are what have influenced how we navigate the community, of just feeling like there's a mold of what a traditional PR pro looked like. And if you didn't fit into that mold, then it meant that you had to change yourself to do so, or that there wasn't a space for you. And so I think overcoming those things has just been like a testament to like believing in the things that I, you know, am passionate about. I think it was hard, but I put my foot down, and I knew the one thing that I didn't want to do was to change myself to exist in, you know, this space, because I felt like there's so many instances in life and prior to that where I had to fit a mold and I had to do those things to become successful. And I really wanted to prove to myself and to prove to others that you didn't need to look a certain way, that you didn't need to like, you know, behave or value certain things to be successful in the industry, and that you could really do things like your own way. I think that most people probably, you know, when they're in constrictive work environments, they feel that too, of like, wow, like this is not a space where I feel like I'm fully accepted. I can't show up the way that I am. So it's like a, you know, in a way, it's like a resistance. It's like it's a resistance and a rejection to, I think, what society and what specifically in this space, you know, what at that time PR professionals were expected to just live up to. So I think just by staying true, you know, and understanding that I wanted to carve out my own path and I wanted other people to be able to carve out their own paths, kind of kept me very headstrong in pushing through to overcome those challenges.
Yeah, I definitely relate to a lot of what you're saying. I've experienced it too, as I'm sure a lot of us have as well. Just on that ageism, you know, when you're the youngest person, you know, at your job, you do feel almost kind of like, you know, an imposter in a sorts.
Yeah.
Like, am I supposed to be here? And you
Mhm.
kind of, you know, it kind of makes you feel like you have to change yourself to fit in, but that's not what you have to do. So
Not at all.
right. So switching gears a little bit, PR Girl Manifesto often puts out content that encourages PR pros to relax, reset, and take some time for themselves. So why is self-care so important for PR professionals specifically?
Specifically, I think self-care is important for PR pros because it is a space where no one is going to tell you that. I remember wearing my exhaustion, my stress, like my anxiety as a badge of honor, because it meant that I was like a hard worker, and that I was, you know, like I was doing the work. And there was nothing to dispel that narrative. Like I wasn't hearing anything else. I was like, you need to rest. Like I think that people have an expectation of comm pros and PR pros that we are always meant to be connected, right? We're always meant to be plugged in. We're always meant to be like working, and that we go above and beyond for our jobs, for our clients. And nobody talks about the detriment that it does to PR and comm professionals. Of why is it that, you know, we get anxiety if we're away from our computer or our phone for too long? Why do we feel like the moment that we get an email after work hours, we still need to respond? You know, that's a lot of what the narrative that was being reflected to me when I was in this space. And it was like, if you don't do that, then you're not a good PR professional, PR pro. So that's why we are so just so adamant about pushing this idea of rest, reset, relaxation, take time, because you know, what does that lead to if you don't do those things? Like if there's that quote that's like viral, if you don't make time to rest, your body will make time for you. And that's real, you know, that's very real. I think your body will shut down on you. Like you deserve to rest. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to feel like you have a life outside of like your work.
Right.
And so for us, it's just so important to get that type of content out there because we know that a lot of people are not hearing that anywhere else. We like think about everybody who benefits off of your lack of self-care, you know, your lack of being able to set up boundaries for yourself. A ton of people. No one who's benefiting off of that is necessarily going to tell you like, hey, I think that you should stop responding to my emails. Like, no, hey, I think that you should take more time to yourself. Like, don't answer on the, like, no, like not many people will, you know, I think take themselves out of that to be able to tell someone else that, even if they are benefiting from the work. So it's just so important because like most PR pros love what they do. And you know, I think that they'd like to be doing it for some time, but if you don't take the time to reset, if you don't take time to rest, like you can become disillusioned with the work that you're doing and the space that you find yourself in. And that's the quickest way to just be like, well, I don't want to do this anymore. And so it's just really important that we integrate that. For that reason, and too, because we want people to understand that they're more than their work, you know, and that's a reflection of my own experiences too, is that I felt that my value was tied up in what I was able to produce, how much I was able to do, you know, how much I was able to give. And that couldn't be the farthest thing from the truth. Like, I think that a lot of industries lack like the humanizing of people, which is, you know, which is wild because like we're humans. But it lacks that. And I think that that's what we really try to do is be like, yo, so you are a human being. You deserve time. Self-care is important. You're a human being. And so it's just important for us to get that messaging out and have it be consistent. You know, we don't just post it once. We're consistently posting something that reminds you, take your weekend to yourself. If you do nothing else, maybe take your Sunday to yourself. Like you can disconnect, you can be tired. Because I think people need the reminder, especially if they're not hearing it or seeing it from somewhere else.
Right. Yeah, everything you're saying, I'm in my head, I'm just like, preach, because yeah, I'm sure we all have felt that way, you know, have the pressure to always stay connected and online, and especially during 2020 with the COVID-19 pandemic and how everyone really had to just change their routines and get adjusted to a new kind of work life. So yeah, and it's hard to get out of that mentality that you can take a break for a moment, you know, take some time for yourself. So that's really important advice for us to take. So who are some of the historical Black figures in PR who've influenced you and inspired you to join the industry?
So I'm gonna like flip that question. Like, backwards and do who inspired you to join the industry, because it's actually really funny. So I was recommended to do PR and marketing back when I was in high school, because I was of the fangirl age. Like, I was a member of several street teams. Like, I was just obsessed. And I came across this woman who was working in marketing at the time, and I was just like, hey, I want to do I want to be a street team for your son, who was also like a musician at the time. And I was just like, this is my ticket in. Like, I am going to street team. Me and this person are going to become the best of. And the crazy thing is, we're friends. We're really good friends. But my trajectory was like, we're going to be the best of friends, and then I'm going to be in these spaces, and like, it's just going to be everything. Like, Nick Jonas is going to be my best friend. Like, that's where my mind was. And so I worked with her for a while and really developed a great relationship. And now that I think about it, like, she took a chance on a 16-year-old fangirl who was just like, these are the things I can do. Like, I can make graphics. I'm really good at communicating. And she told me, like, you need to go into PR and marketing. She's like, have you ever considered this? And at the time, I didn't even know what that was. I didn't know that PR was a thing. I didn't know marketing was a thing. And I actually didn't even listen to her when I went to school. I ended up being a creative writing major, an English major, because I thought I was going to be the next Anna Wintour. Like, I was going to work my way up. And that was going to be my life. I was going to be the Black Anna Wintour. I went to school and hated the comm program that I was in. Not the comm, sorry, the English program that I was in. And just was like, what am I going to do? Like, what am I going to do? Because this is not what I want to do. And I went to the comm department and got some information about it. And then, ironically, I think that was around the time that I started getting into Scandal.
Olivia Pope,
Right. So imagine being like, okay, like, oh, this is what Olivia Pope does. Like, yeah, I want to do this. Right. Like, I want to clean up messes. I want to be involved in like political mess. Right. But yeah, so it's really interesting, because I think that's what inspired me. I was just like, well, this seems like a very interesting career like choice to be in. And that was off of this perception that I had from this show. But as of course I continued to do actual research and actually like did background on what industry I was getting myself into, I realized that, that there were a lot of Black pioneers in the communications like world, especially in history, and that was something to me that like, I'd never heard of a Black PR professional, right? And then you learn about like Dr. Jesse Lewis Sr., you learn about Patricia Tobin, you learn about all these people. And they are the inspiration. I think that in terms of like historical Black PR figures who can influence me now, it's them. It's knowing that like, as a Black woman, my people have been in this space. They've been in the forefront of this space and have been pioneers in this space. It's like, it's hard to just choose one, because I think it's like choosing like, who's your favorite historical figure? Right. It's hard. Like, there's so many people who I think who have broken barriers and have pushed through. So I'd say like, Patricia Tobin, for example, is one, but just not just her. There are plenty.
Yeah. Yeah, when you were mentioning, whenever you've seen Olivia Pope from Scandal and just what she did on TV, I mean, when I hear that, I think of, representation matters. You've seen someone who is doing something that you never thought you could do, and they're doing it and they're doing it great. So I think that, that just drives home the point that even on social media, I know, whenever I see your content, I'm sure our attendees today, I feel that way. I say, okay, this young Black woman, she started her own media agency. She has a huge following on social media with her community resources. So that's just inspiring. It's like, if you can do it, then, we all can. It just gives somebody strength. Yeah.
And that really makes me happy, because I feel like that's one of the big things with the community that we've tried to do, right? Is that when I first got into the industry, no one looked like me in marketing and in like what was being, given back to me. I didn't see myself. And that's been such an important thing, to be able to like, to push Black women, to push women of color at the forefront, and to make sure that we're intentional in showcasing, you know, like the talent that exists in this space of who are Black women, who are women of color. It's like very, it's important. So to hear that means that I've achieved.
Yeah, you're doing what you're supposed to, yeah.
Appreciate it.
Okay, so my next question kind of builds off of that. So how can brands make sure that they are fostering a diverse and inclusive community during Black History Month, but also beyond Black History Month?
Yeah. So I think when it comes to this question, I feel like it's, to me, there's not a linear way or a one size fits all. But I think that for brands who are really serious about fostering diverse and inclusive communities, like it starts at the base. People are very quick to post like, you know, Black history content, are very quick to make comments on like racial inequity, but like, are your hiring practices equitable, right? Like when you are looking to hire, is there a diverse pool of candidates that you're pulling from? You know, are you interviewing, are you just like pulling from some type of pool? Or are you really making the effort to make sure that you are exploring all that there is out there? Like, do you make an effort to even utilize diverse vendors? Like, that's another thing too. Are you working with, you know, Black owned, POC owned like vendors? Do you value the diverse voices in your already existing brand, in your company? Just like the real questions to ask yourself, you know, before you even post anything. Does this reflect internally where we're at? So I think for brands who are looking to really foster diverse and inclusive communities, it has to be a goal. It can't just be like a byproduct or something that you think about. No, it has to be ingrained in your bottom line. Like that at the end of the day, this is something that's important to us, and that reflects itself in everything that we do.
Yeah, I'm definitely, I'm agreeing with everything that you're saying. And I know just scrolling through some content that's been on PR Girl Manifesto, the Instagram page, and also on your agency's Instagram page, I've seen that you guys are currently doing a campaign for Black History Month, Mothers of the Movement. Did you want to talk a little bit about that for people who may not have seen that?
Yeah, sure. So Mothers of the Movement is a love letter to our foremothers, specifically the women in the Black Panther Party. I think one of the great things of knowing where and what you come from is that you have a lens of like, these are the individuals who were, you know, really doing work. And I think that we've seen that repeatedly with Black women who have been included, who not even included, who have been at the forefront, who have pioneered so many historical movements, who have fought for everybody, who have fought for, you know, other marginalized communities. But yet there's this level of erasure that happens when it comes to Black women and their involvement in movement. So Mothers of the Movement is just an ode to the Black women of the Black Panther Party who played such an integral role in the development of that movement. So Elaine Brown, Angela Davis, Assata Shakur, Kathleen Cleaver, names that you don't really like hear or learn about, you know, in school. And so the agency, you know, we decided that this campaign would make sense. We had the idea for some time because it's a part of a larger collection that we do where we were really big on like conscious and wearable design. So everything that we put out through the agency that it's just meant to spark conversation. It's meant to make people like think twice or to you know, ask questions. So that specifically was an opportunity to highlight women that, you know, are successful in their own right, but that we felt like don't always get the recognition that they need. And then tying it back to this larger idea of like, you know, community care. We fundraise through our agency's initiatives and our agency's like collections and apparel because it's our way of doing our part, right? Of using creativity, of using this aspect of what it is that we're doing to give back. So we give proceeds to Black owned and Black led organizations that are helping to support Black communities.
Yeah, and just in tying into that, so there's also a Daughters of the Movement aspect too of that, right?
Yeah. So we did Daughters of the Dream. And those are current community organizers and activists that we, you know, are really just proud of, right? That are championing for Black communities, are championing for LGBTQIA+ communities. And so Daughters of the Dream are like our current day women of the movement, you know, who are continuing the legacy that our mothers of the movement started.
Yeah. So my next question for you is, for those who are not in a senior management decision-making role, how can those people hold upper management accountable for committing to D&I initiatives?
Yeah. I know it depends on where you work and how comfortable, you know, each individual feels, because we've had conversations where people have told, you know, specifically through Hold Up Press, where they're like, I'm really scared to speak up or to speak out because I feel as though if I do, you know, there's a potential for me to be blacklisted. There's a potential for me to be punished, you know, indirectly. And so I think for us, when we talk about accountability, right, if like keep track of everything your upper management says that they're going to do, right? While it might not be your responsibility to do so, you know, sometimes the gap needs to be filled, and it's usually by, you know, the individual who's trying to hold someone accountable. Yeah. Everything that they've said about commitment to D&I, right? Everything they haven't said about commitment to D&I as well, because how accountable your senior management is plays a role in the company culture, right? How safe you feel, how supported you feel, all of those things. So if you're not in a senior management decision-making role, I think that, you know, at the very least, you should be benchmarking the things that you feel are lacking, right? And just being upfront about it. I think there's a different story if you're not speaking up, and you know, if you're not speaking up, you're not saying anything, and no one is responding, or no one is like picking up on the fact that there's a level of accountability expected. But there, you know, I think that we're in a space where, especially right now, most companies seem as if they are committed, right, to learning, to progressing, to becoming better. And so I think at the very least, you know, speaking up, right, speaking up about that. And once you've spoken up, like, take note, you know, all the things that, you know, were not, I don't want to say promised, but all the things that were spoken about, that were, you know, that were pointed out as things that you would like to see happen, or things that make you uncomfortable. See how people respond to that. And I think, you know, it really depends. So like, for example, Hold the Press, we were able to put those calls out and ask for numbers, for diversity numbers, because we recognized that we weren't affiliated with any organization, and we weren't affiliated with any, you know, company that would restrict us from doing so. Even in our own internal team, the agencies that my co-founders work for, their founders and their CEOs were supportive of this. So I think it really does depend on what, you know, where you're attacking this from. For us, it's a little easier because, you know, we're essentially like, hey, like, the gig's up, the bull is up, like, where are your numbers? Like, right, you know, right. And if you can't commit to your showing us, like, we know what the numbers are. I think most people in this industry know what the numbers are, but it's about that commitment to transparency, because you need transparency to be held accountable. Like, that's the first thing. People need to be transparent to be held accountable. So I definitely think it differs depending on what, like, role you're accessing or you're attacking from.
Yeah, that's really great advice. I know it can often feel, you know, quite intimidating, you know, to have to, you know, not be in a senior management role, and you're unsure, you know, kind of how to approach it and how to handle the situation. But I definitely think, you know, like you're saying, holding people accountable, you know, making note of all the times where you, or maybe one of your colleagues who might be afraid to speak up as well, you know, might feel uncomfortable or discriminated against. That's very important.
Yeah, and I think, in specifically talking to, like, in this sense of, like, maybe being non-Black or non-POC, right? So we have this, you know, this way that we look at things at PR Girl Manifesto and at Hold the Press and at the agency of, like, allyship is great. We want you to be an accomplice, right? And I think that's another thing too. Is just like, being an ally is like I empathize with you. Being an accomplice means I'm committed to, like, to doing this work with you. And I think that that's something that's really just integral for people to understand, especially those who want to like stand in the gap for maybe their POC and Black colleagues. Is just like, how can you help the accountability? I think it's something to think about.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's very important. And I think I've never heard of that term before. You know, don't be an ally, be an accomplice. But that's that's true. You know, so that's wonderful. So I just have another question for you. So what advice can you give to young women and women of color who are aspiring to become PR professionals, or, you know, even have their own agency like you've done?
Yeah. Like what piece of advice should I share? I think one of the things that I wish somebody had told me, that I tell everybody now, specifically young women and women of color, is that you deserve to be here, there, wherever, whatever space you're trying to occupy. You deserve to be there. You have a right to be there. I think we talk about imposter syndrome, right? I think not believing, and it might not even be like something that comes from within, but how people treat you, right? And how you feel in the environment that you're in, like not believing that you belong to be somewhere, not believing that you belong to be somewhere, will keep you stuck, right? Will keep you playing small. And I wish somebody had told me that and like had ingrained it in my head. You deserve to be here. When you get an opportunity, do not second guess it. You're getting the opportunity because you deserve it, because you've shown that you deserve it. And also another thing too is that you don't like that respect. And I know that we're grown up, we're raised talking about you have to earn respect, and that's very true. But I think that there's this different type of respect that you experience when you are, young or a young woman of color, where you feel like you have to like pay your dues, and you continue to pay them even after they've been paid. And I think it's just the way that the system is set up to make, young women and people of color just feel as though there's always something more that they should be doing, that there's always another level that they need to get to. Internally, self-development, yes, but you cannot let, people who are committed to making you second guess yourself be the barometer for like how you view what you're doing and your work. And I wish that's what someone had told me when I entered the industry in terms of like creating an agency. I think by far the greatest benefit that I have had is having worked for an agency. I think that there are so many things that I learned being in-house, working for someone else, learning systems that are the same things that I apply to how my agency functions. And I noticed that there's a gap for that. For a lot of people have to learn those things. And so I'd say, like, if you're looking to create your own agency, work at an agency first. I know that that's not always feasible, but if it is, try to do that. Because I think that you learn so much, and you learn that like certain things do not have to be hard, because the resources are there. Like these are systems that have been proven that work. And having that knowledge really did help. Versus seeing some colleagues who started their own agencies and had only ever freelance, and so it's a struggle. There's a gap there. There's a bit of a knowledge gap on like how what are systems of procedure. How do you handle certain situations? How do you structure this? Like how do you create something that is sustainable? So I'd say that try to get as much like agency experience as you can, and then use what you've learned there to apply to your own agency.
Yeah, that's all great, really great tips. I just think it's it's very fitting that it's Monday, because it's Monday motivation for me. I'm sure it is for everyone else too. Yeah. So what other community resources do you recommend for women of color who are navigating the industry, even young professionals too?
Yes. So I think a few. So I think if you make sure you're following, right, as many industry publications, podcasts, platforms as possible. I think one of my greatest like advantages is that I love to learn. And I believe that I can learn from anybody or anything. And so I'd say like, definitely, you know, you have a PR week, you have a Cision, you have a PR daily, but you also have other platforms, right? There's the PR net, that's another community before you hit send. Like there's just so many, like publicist.co now, which is the app that which is a new platform, but also share information. Like just ingrain yourself in the industry as much as possible. Because even if you're not like able to listen to something every day or read something every day, you're still, you know, you'll still come into contact with it. You know, you'll still pick up on something because you're surrounding yourself with all of these resources. I'd also say, like, don't be afraid to ask other PR professionals for help. I really want to break down this narrative that like PR pros are like, just don't engage with each other and can't help each other. Because we're a community, we're a network. And I think that we need to lean into that. Yeah, you know, we might be fighting for the same placement sometimes, but that doesn't mean that we can't be friends. And I wholeheartedly believe that. You know, I think that, you know, more networking among PR professionals creates a more, you know, just a positive environment to work in. So I'd say definitely, yeah, I'd say make sure that you're ingrained in industry publications, trade publications, all that platforms, but also like reach out, connect with other PR professionals. You know, don't be afraid to slide in someone's DM and be like, hey, I really love the work that you're doing. Like, you know, there's just so much, like, and I'll give a perfect example. Anoma Owens, who's the founder of Before You Hit Send, me and Anoma have never met like a day in our, like, we didn't know each other from school or from college or from anything, but we had a mutual respect for what the other person was doing. Specifically for me, you know, to see another Black woman like creating in the same space. And we slid in each other's DMs. We were like communicating with each other's content, like, oh, I love this, can I share this? And we're like, hey, let's just get on a call. And we got on a call, and out of that, the PR Power Hour was born. You know, if I decided that I was just gonna stay to myself and never engage or interact with other individuals, that would never have happened. If Anoma and I were both like, well, there's no need to network, or nobody like wants to network, we would have never like created such a great relationship. She's one of my co-founders for Hold the Press, you know? And like your network really is such a powerful thing, you know? And it's not necessarily like your network to like to elevate you, or it doesn't always need to be somebody that's like in a higher or better position than you. Know, like it's your peers, you know, it's networking across, it's connecting across. So I definitely would say, stay connected to your colleagues, those that, you know, you work with in real life, and those that you might come across on the internet.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, just PRSA Pittsburgh, you know, personally for me, it's a great organization to network with other communications professionals from all seniority levels too. There's tons of young professionals, we have mid-level, we have senior, and so we are all constantly learning from one another. I know I personally love all of my board members, so that's a little shout out to to our board members. But yes, I definitely agree with that statement. It seems like we have a few questions that are coming in, so we'll get to a few audience questions here.
Okay.
So we have one from Deanna. What is one thing we can all do after this webinar as advocates for POC in the industry?
Yeah. One, my go-to is, if you see it, call it out. If it feels uncomfortable, if it feels wrong, call it out. I think that it's so important that if you want to advocate, that you're willing to hold others accountable, and that you're willing to stand in the gap. And most of the times, like, we know what's wrong. We know what doesn't feel right. We know what could be offensive, you know, to somebody else. We have an inkling. So that's if it feels wrong, call it out, you know? And if you see, I think another thing that I really wish I had experienced, you know, from friends or people who, you know, wanted to be advocates, is that even if I don't verbally say something, if you know that it's affecting me, if you see like me making myself like small, because of something that I have experienced or something, you know, that was just it clearly showed inequity. You know, like that is your moment. That is your moment to stand in the gap. And I know people feel touchy about it. They're like, oh, I don't know if it's my place, you know. I don't know, does so-and-so want me advocating for them? And you know, it is circumstantial, but I'd say that like for me, like in my personal experience, like, you know, those moments have meant a tremendous deal to me because it didn't feel like I had to tell somebody, hey, look at me, like I'm suffering, or, you know, I wish somebody would be by my side. And so I just think like it's just a great general rule. Like if you see something, it's like the MTA, if you see something, say something. So yeah, so just, you know, I think that's one thing. I think also just, you know, I think committing to like understanding. A lot of people will be like, you know, well, you like learn, you know, but commit to that, you know, commit to it long term, because racial inequity doesn't always look like the same. What racial inequity looked like, you know, decades ago, right, does not look the same. So like, it's not just a one-time thing. It's not just a like, I'm going to spend this month, or I'm going to spend, you know, this week learning. Like it's a commitment, because a lot of that learning is unlearning, right? And think about how long it takes to unlearn something. So it is a lifetime commitment.
Yeah, and just to go off that too, I think listening also is a really big tool for communicators and for our allies in our workplace too, is just listen. You know, I know it's sometimes hard for us communicators. We're always looking to be loud and have our voices out there, but sometimes it's really, you learn a lot just from sitting back and just hearing someone and just fully investing into what matters to them.
Yeah, and I think another thing too about like being a communicator, which is something that especially struck over this summer, is that we know what it looks like to communicate. We know how powerful communication is, right? So why would we ever be the ones to stay silent when we know the power of stories? We know the power of words, of language. Like those are things that communicators know. So I almost think it's like a little bit of like an added responsibility on us. And like, to that point too, of like, we're talking about like how people can like advocate, right, or how they can be allies. Like if you like, one of my dear friends, her name is Caroline, and you know, we know each other from New York, and she's a white woman, and she was in charge of crafting messaging for her company during the summer, like during the racial inequity, the riots, the murders of George Floyd. And the messaging that her company was putting out was not reflective of anything that they stood for. And she called it out, you know? And I think that instead of just making something look nice, you know, or making it digestible so that people would, you know, like it palatable, she was just like, no, like, I'm not going to be the person that allows for this to go out. I know that there might be, you know, some backlash, but it's just like, it's just not going to happen. And then she did that because she visibly, I mean, thank God, like Caroline has, you know, she's pretty in tune she's pretty in tune and a decent person, but she also realized, you know, that her POC colleagues were very uncomfortable, but weren't saying anything, and she could like sense that. So it goes back to that, like, you know, sometimes your Black colleagues or your POC colleagues are not always gonna like be comfortable enough to speak up, like, and pay attention to that, you know. And I think that those just goes on like being a decent human being and being being an empath and being empathetic to like what people are experiencing and are feeling.
Yeah, definitely. We have another chat question here. It's from April. I love that you mentioned how important self-care is in this fast-paced industry. Do you have any specific self-care tips or ways to change that, you know, always have to be on go mindset?
Yeah, so I've been spending like the last year and a half, 2 years of just like unlearning. And it's just that like, I was a person that like would go to bed at 3 a.m., wake up at 6 a.m. and be like, oh, 3 hours is good, I'm good to go, like, let's do this. And I think specifically when I transitioned to like having my own agency and also having like a community and also being a part of so many things, it was really important for me to check myself and to check and reevaluate my boundaries. So one thing that I do now is on Mondays, my phone is actually on airplane mode. And that is because Monday is the day that like, I just have to get myself together for the week ahead. I don't like going into Mondays like fast paced. I don't like being like, oh my God, my email is blowing up, like what's going on? And what I've done is I've established those boundaries with, with the people that I work with. And now that definitely is a little bit more feasible for me because I work for myself. So I can be like, hey, Mondays, like I'm not here. Like you're gonna get my email, you're gonna get my away message. It's gonna tell you like, please don't expect the email from me today.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit easier for me. But what I will say is that everyone should respect your boundaries, and even if it's small things that like you're not gonna take calls on a day of the week, or you don't take calls before a certain hour, right? I think that you deserve to feel as though you can have those boundaries. Just for your sanity, right? I also like now have blocks in my day because I switch from things like very quickly, right? So I'll get off a call and then like have to jump right into like, a meeting, and then have to go like design and have to go, there's just a lot happening. So for me, I create blocks in my day, like 20-minute blocks of just like, you're just gonna chill. You're gonna listen to some white noise because that's what like centers me. So I listen to white noise and I just like get ready for the next thing without feeling overwhelmed and without feeling like, oh my God, like go. Right. And I think it's just reminding yourself, right, that even if you have to write it down and you have to treat it like an affirmation, like that you deserve to hold space for like for slowness, to be slow, to be, and maybe it's just to be like slower paced. Right. Like we all deserve that. I don't think that we're not meant to be these human beings that are just like consistently like on the go or consistently like just fast paced. That's not, I mean, I personally don't think that's how we're meant to be, but I think that the world tells us, right, that we are, because the world is set up a certain way, and fast pacedness and go benefits certain people. So I think just setting reminders for yourself and also setting boundaries. I think PR pros and comm pros specifically need to set up boundaries because we are always like checked in. We're always engaged. So I think whether it's this is my time to myself, I'm not taking calls on Fridays, or I'm out early Friday, or Monday mornings I'm not around, or just saying I can't do that right now. It's a practice. It is, because I still find myself sometimes like reverting back to that old me who'd be like, sure, I'll do it. like, okay, and it's a process, but I think that again, we all deserve to set boundaries, and we all deserve to rest.
Yeah. And I think now, a lot of people are working from home, so it's even harder, to set those boundaries and to really separate, your workday from, your family and, your kids and all the other needs that you, do around the house. So yeah, I think that's great advice, especially for these times right now.
Yeah. And I think too, like if you, I have friends who actually will let, clients know, or will let like their agencies know, like between these hours, I'm not checking my email, so that they know. And I hate to say you have to train, but sometimes you like, so it's not even like, I don't like that word, but you have to show people, right? How to like interact and engage with you. So if you're like, hey, this is my hard boundary, I think it'll take some time, but eventually everyone will shift and be like, all right, I know that so-and-so is not available. She won't be answering emails between this time. So my email has to get to her before this time, because like everybody also, it puts accountability on other people. To think about how many times you sit in there and someone tells you something at like the 11th hour, and that one thing being said at the 11th hour has now completely like changed everything for you and what you have to get done. Like that's not fair.
Yeah. I've had a personal experience with that too. From working from home, you have your regular 9 to 5 work hours. And back when we all went to the office, we all drove to work and stuck in traffic for like long time. if someone asked me in the time where I would be typically driving home, someone asked me to do something, you know, to post something, to do something. And it's like, you know, obviously our living situations are different now, but you know, we still have those boundaries that need to be set.
Yeah, I think even more so now, because we're all at home, right? So there's a certain just like break, I think, or breaks throughout the day that we were typically used to, or just a routine that no longer exists. Like everything exists in the same place. And I think that it's just so important. Like some, you know, folks have kids, folks have like, and now those kids have to be fed. Like who's helping them with their homework? You know, like those are real things. And so I think specifically in this time, I think one, it's a call to establish boundaries, but I also think it's a call to, like, you know, for leadership to really evaluate expectations and how they expect employees to work and to engage. Because it's like, you know, let's say you don't have the luxury of childcare. Well, then you're like this one person doing all of these things and still trying to work, you know? So maybe the work still gets done, but it's not in the same like way. Or, you know, you don't have the same level of access. I think those are really important things for leadership and for, you know, those at the top to think about currently as well.
Yeah. So we're almost at our end here. Can you tell everyone, you know, your social media handles, where they can find your amazing content?
Sure. I am at the PR Girl Manifesto. So that's at PR Girl Manifesto on all platforms, except for the website. The website is www.theprgirlmanifesto. But I'm there. I'm always super happy to connect and engage. It's me posting and sharing. So if you DM the page, it'll be me responding. But yeah, that's for PR Girl Manifesto. Our agency is AB Media Group. That is AB Media as in media group.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. So if you guys aren't already following her pages, you need to do that. So that's another thing right after this video chat people can do is go follow you and pay attention to your content.
Oh, sure.
So thank you so much for being generous with your time and joining us today. This conversation was very meaningful. It's very motivating. So thank you so much for that. And thank you to everyone else who attended today. And if you want to attend more of these kinds of events from PRSA Pittsburgh, please sign up for our newsletter. You can do that on our website. And also follow all of our social media channels as well. You'll get constant updates. We put out really great content too. So yeah, go and do that. So yeah, thanks everyone. And yeah, thanks. Have a great day.
Thanks for having me.